Hi everyone, and welcome to the FrenchEntrée YouTube channel. This video is part of our series of regional property guides, in which we're going to focus on a particular city, region, or department in France. Today, I'm joined by Christine from Tomette Paris, and we'll be introducing you to the most famous of all the French cities, Paris. We're going to take a look at all of the things that the city offers, as well as some of the practical aspects like transport links and weather, and most importantly, the local property market and investment opportunities available in the area. So hi, Christine, welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Well, let's start at the beginning. Can you just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a bit about your work?
Yes. So my name is Christine. I'm French-American. I was born and raised in Paris. I'm a former dancer, professional dancer. Then while in New York, I was a dancer, and then I switched careers. I went to college and then graduated from law school and practiced law for 25 years. I worked for major corporations, American, Chinese, French. And after 25 years, I decided to switch career. First, I decided to turn a hobby into a full-time work, and I created Tomette Paris. Basically, parents from bilingual schools, parents of children who attended bilingual schools with my daughter. They came from all different countries, and they needed advice about buying in Paris. And I kind of helped them, and after a while, I decided to turn that into Tomette Paris.
Wow, what an interesting journey.
Thank you. And so I moved back from New York in 2002. I'm married, and I'm married to a Frenchman, and I have an 18-year-old daughter who just moved to Orleans, to study law. So,
following in your footsteps. Great. Well, let's jump into some questions about Paris. So unlike other regions, Paris probably doesn't need too much of an introduction to our viewers. But I would love to know, first of all, what you think makes Paris unique compared to the rest of France.
Well, Paris is the most beautiful and romantic city in the world. I guess if you watch the Olympic and Paralympic Games, you had the opportunity to see how beautiful Paris is. And what sets it apart is the fact that it's the lifestyle, really. Beautiful monuments and the lifestyle, you take time to enjoy parks and the streets, and the food is so good. And there's so many cultural events and museums, so many things to do. And it's really an international city. Lots of students from all around the world, and people from all around the world who live in Paris or have like a small place, a flat, a pied-à-terre in Paris. And so it's a very diverse city, very dynamic. And the good thing is that it has 5 train stations. So you can very quickly go to the countryside. In just 1 hour away from Paris, you are in Normandy, in other regions, which are quite different from Paris. So that's the good thing. We have the high-speed train here, and it's very easy to travel in France and also abroad. London is just 2 hours away, and Berlin is not far. I mean, it's very, very accessible.
Yeah, it certainly is one of my favorite French cities, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me. So why do you think foreign property buyers should consider buying in Paris?
Well, it's a sure investment. Buying property in Paris is a sure investment. Between 2010 and 2020, property prices in Paris rose by over 21%. So despite the crisis, despite the inflation, COVID, all kinds of crises, it's a sure investment, especially in Paris. People will always want to buy in Paris. It's a sure investment. Paris is one of the, if not the most sought after city to purchase. So it is definitely a sure investment.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, before we talk more about the property market, let's go into a little bit more detail about Paris itself and what it's really like living there. So let's start with the weather. What sort of climate does Paris have, and what can property owners expect, especially throughout the year and throughout the 4 seasons?
Okay, with the climate change, it's a little bit different. Like August here was pretty gray. It has a tendency to be very hot in the summer. That's it's different from years ago. So I guess you don't really know what to expect with the weather, but in general, it's not very cold in the wintertime. You rarely have snow in Paris in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. If we have snow for Christmas, then it's just wonderful. But it doesn't happen as often as in New York, for example. Otherwise, it's usually cloudy and there's some rain, but the temperatures are pretty mild to cold. And in the summertime, it can be very hot for a Parisian, but maybe for someone who comes from, California or another country, it may not seem that hot. Like, for example, it's not rare that temperatures would reach in the 30s, like 35, 36 degrees Celsius in the summertime, which is something that we would not even, experience a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true. It definitely is changing all around the country. So it's something for people to be aware of. But I would agree that it's definitely milder than perhaps some people are used to, especially people coming from the States. Mm-hmm. So what about the transport links to and around Paris? So you mentioned a little bit about some of the international travel links and links to different departments, but what about in Paris itself? Is there anything buyers should be aware of?
In Paris, there's the metro, the subway, which is, very convenient. Usually people ask me, I want to find an apartment in Paris close to the subway station. And I say, well, there are subway stations, like very everywhere, and not only that, but there are buses, which are very convenient. There's the tram transportation, which circulates around Paris. And now there's what we call a Grand Paris, which is like an extension of Paris. So if you want to go outside of Paris to other cities around Paris, then you can still take the RER, which is not a subway, but it's another type of subway that goes to further distances. For example, you take the RER to go from Paris to the Charles de Gaulle Airport or to the Orly Airport. And then to go to the countryside or to the south of France, you take the high-speed train. And it's about like 4 hours. If you want to go, for example, to Burgundy, it will take an hour and a half. Avignon, about 2 hours in high-speed train. Brittany, also about 3 hours. And to go to Strasbourg, it takes 2 hours, about 2 hours. So it's very fast, very accessible. And of course, we have airports if you want to travel internationally, but nowadays, people with climate change and everything, people have a tendency to take the high-speed train. But with airports, we have two major airports, Charles de Gaulle and Orly. It's also very easy to go to other cities in other countries, whether it be Germany or Italy or anywhere else. It's very, very accessible, very easy.
Yeah, I mean, of all the French cities, Paris has to be the best connected, both internationally and nationally. So that's certainly a big plus for people. What about, how would you describe the local life and culture in Paris?
Well, local life, it's, there's an arrondissement for everybody, local life. There's left bank and right bank. So left bank, you have Saint-Germain-des-Prés, but you also have the Asian district. And on the right bank, of course, you have the Eiffel Tower, the 16th. So I would say the right bank more like towards Bastille and République. It's more like trendy. So you'll find lots of artists and lots of nightlife. Of course, lots of restaurants, and people do take time to have a good lunch on weekends or brunch. Lots of clubs, and also people entertain in their own home. They have friends over, or they have family come over for a nice lunch on Sundays. If they don't go to the country to see their family. The left bank is more, I would say, more chic, has a tendency to be more expensive, although you also have, arrondissements, which are not as expensive as Saint-Germain or the 7th arrondissement, which is one of the most expensive. So I would say if you're young and you like art and all of that, and your students, maybe you will prefer to go to the right bank, typically. And if you're maybe like in your 40s and older, maybe you will prefer the left bank. But it's all a matter of personal taste, and the lifestyle in Paris, usually people, they walk around. They bike, they take their scooters, or they take public transportation. They will go, they work. There's lots of companies here. So it's a very dynamic. There's lots of startups and international businesses, students. There's La Sorbonne here. And it's a lot of fun. There's always something happening. You have the fashion week, and you have lots of movie theaters and businesses. So there are so many things to do, but the speed, the lifestyle is not as fast as, for example, in like cities like in New York, where you work, everything goes so fast and all of that. Here, you take time to, have and enjoy, have a nice meal or have a nice glass of wine, and enjoy being with your friends. And it's not as fast as in other cities. There are maybe more business oriented, although, Paris, there's lots of business going on in Paris anyway.
Yeah, it's a really nice mix, I think, between, it's still a big world city, like you say, but at the same time, there's that French culture that, allows people to take time for things and enjoy a good meal and all of that.
Yes, definitely.
So before we move on to looking at the property market, is there anything else that you think foreign buyers should know about Paris? Is there anything else we haven't covered?
Well, Paris is not, I would say Paris is not a dangerous city. You don't have crimes like you would see in other cities. People sometimes ask me, oh, should I be careful and all of that? I advise them to watch for their their bags, because there are some pickpockets in very touristy places. But other than that, it's a pretty safe city. A pretty safe city. So that's one thing I would like to say. And people speak English more than they used to. They are more open to tourism and to, and I guess people have experienced that with the Olympics, the way they were greeted and, sometimes you have the image of the waiter who's like grumpy and not nice. With the younger generations now, it's very different. The younger generation, they are more used to travel around the world. They speak English. They are very dynamic and they are open to the world. So I think it's changed a lot,
Yeah, that's a really good thing to point out, because I think there are a lot of old stereotypes about France and Paris in particular that have not yet died. And I think you're right, it is changing a lot. So that's something really nice to point out for people.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, let's take a bit more of a look at the actual property market in France, or in Paris specifically. So what is the property like at the moment? We're in 2024 at the moment. What's the market doing in Paris?
Well, prices are pretty stable now. Basically, between 2020 and 2023, there was a decline in real estate price, mostly due to COVID, mostly due to the fact that after COVID, a lot of Parisians decided to move outside of Paris to have a garden. Also because businesses were more open to letting their employees work from their home, to work remotely. So a lot of Parisians decided to move outside of Paris. So because of that, more properties were available on the market. At the same time, there was inflation. So French banks were not as willing they were stricter to extend loans. So there were a lot of properties on the market, prices were high. Then they started to decrease in 2023, end of 2022, 2023, and now it's more stable. So whereas you would see arrondissement that the price would be around 10,000 euros per square meter. Now you have several arrondissements which are below 10,000 euros per square meter. So, for example, to be very concrete, a few days ago, I visited apartments in the 7th. The 7th is considered as one of the most expensive arrondissements in Paris. I visited a 34 square meter, one-bedroom apartment with a very nice layout, with a view on the Eiffel Tower. And the cost was 500K, which is a pretty good price. That was a one-bedroom with a view on the Eiffel Tower. Or I also visited around that price another apartment in the 9th with a magnificent view, not on the Eiffel Tower, in around Rue des Martyrs. Rue des Martyrs is also a very sought after, very trendy, young families. Rue de Mouffetard is really, Rue des Martyrs is very famous. It's one of those old streets, kind of like Rue Mouffetard, but Rue Mouffetard is in the 5th. In the 9th, with lots of what we call commerce de bouche, the butcher, the bakery, little stores, as opposed to chain stores where you buy your cheese and your bread. And So it's like a pedestrian street. And so I visited also an apartment for a client. It was a one-bedroom apartment with a balcony, a long balcony. You could put a small table on there. And it was also like less than 500K, a one bedroom. So you don't have to be a millionaire to to buy something in Paris. You really don't. And so that means also for a studio, you could find one for like 350, 400 a studio, which is, well maintained and, good, nice property. So that's the tendency right now in 2024, stable prices. And I mean, I cannot tell you what will happen in 2025. It depends on different factors, but loans, banks are more willing to extend loans. The interest rate in France for loans for French people is around 4%. It has a tendency to be less now. For foreign buyers, it's a little bit more. I work with a mortgage broker, which can work and find loans for foreign buyers, which is, it's rare. And usually it's not quite impossible to get a loan from abroad to buy in France. But I work with a French mortgage broker. They only work with foreign buyers. And even though the interest rates are higher than for the French, they are much more lower than the type of loans you would get, for example, in the United States, which are around 7 or even 8%. Here it's more like, for foreign buyers, more like 5% or less. So still very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And thank you for giving us the sort of ballpark figures as well. I think that'll be really useful for people and perhaps surprising as well for people, because Paris is often seen by some people as being, out of their league. But it's nice to hear that there are also some very affordable properties. So what about areas? What are some of the most popular arrondissements in Paris? You mentioned a couple already, but especially for foreign property buyers, where are some of the more popular places?
Well, like I said, there's an arrondissement for everybody. And I work with all kinds of budgets and all ages. I found an apartment for someone she's young, she was 29, and she wanted something near Gare de l'Est. So I found her something in the 10th. Then other older people, they were looking for something in the 12th near Nation. Then, of course, people dream of the Eiffel Tower and Saint-Germain-des-Prés. But really, it depends on the person. I get all kinds of requests. The more surprising thing, though, is that there used to be more demands for the 16th years ago, for the 16th. And now although prices dropped in the 16th, it's not what it used to be. I don't have that many requests for the 16th. It's more like the 10th, like Bastille, République for the younger clients, and Saint-Germain-des-Prés and Latin Quarter for people who, they are more like left bank and they want to feel like they are in maybe a Woody Allen movie,
Interesting. What about types of property or perhaps different investment opportunities? What kind of things are actually available in Paris?
Well, typically you have the Haussmannian buildings, they are very, very nice 19th century buildings. And in there you have those typical Parisian apartments with fireplace and high ceilings, or maybe on top of a building, but you have a very nice view on the Parisian rooftops. So the older buildings, usually 19th century. Then if you are in a more recent arrondissement, more on the outskirts of Paris, because basically Paris started with Ile Saint-Louis. That was the first arrondissement, right? It's the first. And then it's the oldest one. And then as you go around like a snail shell, you go to the double digits, then you will find more recent buildings. Like in the 12th, you get more recent buildings, or in the 15th or the 19th or the 20th. But usually in Paris, you find older buildings that are renovated, and they will usually come with a cellar. So the cellars are usually not renovated and are very, very old. People put their suitcases there, or wine. Sometimes they even rent out their cellar because they don't have any use for it. But usually, you'll find apartments that are older. Sometimes they will even have tomettes on the floor, which is a very special tile. And, sometimes you open those building gates and you will find huge trees and peace and quiet. So if you have like a view on a courtyard, and even though you are in a very busy area, you can find yourself in an apartment which is very, very quiet, and you can even hear the little birds. So, yeah.
That sounds beautiful. Okay, well, let's look at a bit of advice that you have for buyers now. So firstly, what advice would you have for somebody considering buying a property in Paris?
Yes. First, you have to be really clear about your budget. You have to do your homework and know precisely what type of budgets, because sometimes people dream and they want everything, but they don't have the budget, or they may be surprised about prices that they are not as expensive. Some apartments may not be as expensive as they would think. So you have to do your homework about price, about budget. And I help my clients with that, actually. And sometimes I send them to a tax lawyer, even, if there are several investments, or they want to rent out their place when they are not in Paris and they want to know about taxes. So that's really the basis, to know about your exact budget. That's really the first. And then usually people who want to buy in Paris, they know Paris already. So they have a pretty good idea of which arrondissement, which area resonates with them.
Yeah.
And other than that, advice, it depends on the person. But I used to be a lawyer. I practiced for 25 years. So it's like in my, my DNA to advise people, to educate my clients, to advocate for them, and to also have an eye for potential pitfalls, and because, real estate involves a lot of money. So there can be tricky things, pitfalls, dishonesty. So I have an eye for that. And again, 25 years experience as a lawyer, it's like I know what to look for, the pitfalls, and the advice I give to my clients, they are usually very, worthwhile to them.
Yeah, I can imagine you're a good person to have on your side. With that in mind, can you share any success stories that you've had with buyers that you've helped in Paris?
Yes, well, every client I help to me is a success story because it's like realizing their dream. It's not something like it's not like getting up and say, "Oh, I'll go buy a croissant around the corner." It's very emotional for someone. It's usually, for example, I helped a family. They are in their 80s. So they are in their 80s, and the lady she she was in Paris 42 times. And she wanted to buy something for her daughter and her grandchildren. And so they had found something, but they weren't sure. They didn't know what to do exactly, how to, they didn't speak French and all of that. And it was very emotional. The day they got the keys, it was very emotional. Or, another family, a little bit younger, in their 60s, they dreamed of having an apartment on Ile Saint-Louis. And it's very rare. Ile Saint-Louis is very, very small. And usually when people have own property on Ile Saint-Louis, they usually come from old families. But I found them something with an amazing view on the Seine and Notre Dame, and exactly what they were looking for. And they were very, very excited about that. And every time, like even the couple I helped, they were looking for an apartment for their children. They had two young children, and for children and themselves, and with two bathrooms. It's not that easy to find an apartment with two bathrooms in Paris. Usually it's like two bedrooms and one bathroom. And I mean, I found their dream apartment there. And then they decided to renovate everything and to open the kitchen, and they are so happy. I recommended an interior designer I work with, and she did a great job for them. And they're very, very excited, and they were able to move in time for the Olympics. So that was the
Yeah,
chair.
perfect.
Yes. And yeah, and I could go on and on about success stories. People are just so happy. I wish I could take pictures at the notaire, when they get their keys with their smiles. But
I love that, because so often we focus so much, especially at FrenchEntrée, we focus so much on the details and the legal side and the tax and the, not making mistakes and all of those things, which of course are very important. But it's also the essence of it is helping people find their dream property. And that's just such a joy, isn't it, to be able to help someone on that journey. So
definitely. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little fairy, like.
Yeah, I like that. Well, one last question. How can you help buyers looking for a property in Paris?
Well, basically, I help not only find their dream property, I am also, well, first of all, I'm different from a real estate agency. I'm a buyer's agent and a lawyer. So I have access to multiple properties. Unlike real estate agencies that have a portfolio of properties and they have to sell the properties that they were mandated by the seller to sell. So I would say real estate agents are more seller focused.
Yeah.
I'm 100% for the buyer, and I have access to multiple properties. in France, unlike in the United States, for example, there's no multiple listing service.
Yeah.
So you will find websites like seloger.com. They have access to different listings, but it's not comprehensive. And Seloger, you will only have published listings. I have access to non-published properties, and I also have contacts, owners, and previous clients who need to sell and all of that. So that that gives access to different properties and that are narrowly tailored to my client's criteria. And in very, very fast also. Because basically if a client looks for property, they will typically have to go through each agency and search and ask questions and then find out that, oh, that apartment is on top of a restaurant, or oh, that apartment is not exactly what it looked like on the picture, because it looked so good on the pictures. And then when you scratch the surface, and your lawyer, you know what questions to ask the real estate agent. So basically, I'm a liaison between my clients and the real estate agents, but I vouch for my clients without any conflict of interest. And I guide my clients throughout the process. So from working on the budget, I recommend the real estate broker that I work with that extends loans to foreign buyers. Then I find properties for them. They select the property. Then I negotiate the price with my negotiating skills. I draft the deed with the notary. I participate in all meetings, whether with the tax lawyer, with the notary. If they want, I can have the documents translated as well. And I can guide them with, I can refer an interior designer, a property manager, all types of services. So it's not only about finding an apartment, it's about advising them in their best interest and taking them all the way from start to finish.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Christine, for such a wonderful introduction to Paris.
Thank you.
I really hope this has been a useful video for anyone considering buying a property in the French capital. If you would like to get in touch with Christine, then you can use the link. We'll put it in the description box to do so and get in touch with her. And if you'd like to discuss your personal project. If you're looking to buy property in France, you might also want to become a FrenchEntrée member so you can benefit from our exclusive members content or chat with one of our FrenchEntrée property and relocation advisors. You can head over to FrenchEntrée.com/members to find out more. And we'll also put the link to that in the information box as well. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos like this one, and we'll see you next time.